Welcome to this video about understanding a little bit more the environment in depth to try to see exactly in a better way how can we analyze competitors. So before I go to develop this video and all the content that goes within, let me show you a brief example about the thing that I want to explain to you. So do you think that Ford Motor Companies is competing against Porsche or Ferrari? We can say that Ford doesn't compete against Porsche or Ferrari or BMW. I don't think so. Can we say that Ford competes against General Motors? Yes. This is a very direct competition. Can we say that Mercedes-Benz competes against BMW in this cluster? Yes. It does. It competes against BMW. But does Mercedes-Benz compete against Nissan or Mazda? No, it doesn't, because it's in another strategic group. So the idea that I want to present in this video, understanding this very short but precise example about automotive manufacturers, it's the idea that we can analyze competitors in a way that we can really understand what competitors are very direct competitors against our company, and what other companies, despite being in the industry, despite being part of the market, are not direct competitors. So in this example, apply into the automotive industry, we can see that there are a lot of competitors from Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Toyota, Ford, GM, Hyundai, Volkswagen, Honda, and many more. But despite all of them being automotive manufacturers and all of them serving customers with automobiles, they do not compete the same way as Mercedes-Benz and BMW, that are direct competitors, or the same way as Porsche and Ferrari. So this is about understanding the strategic position of each competitor and how can a company, when trying to assess the environment using 5 forces framework or using the opportunities and threat in the SWOT analysis, can fine-grain better analysis of the reality. So what we are studying in this particular case, it's understanding a little bit more in depth the environment, and specifically understanding with more precision what we call the industry. And within the industry, we're going to put our focus on rivals, understanding competitors or rivals, the specific market position that they occupy. So in this particular case, what we are doing is conducting a map of strategic groups. And a strategic group is a cluster of firms in a given industry that have similar competitive approaches, similar competitive positions, similar strategies, similar technologies, and they precisely compete for the same customers. So when we are defining a strategic group, as in the previous slide that we have been talking about Mercedes-Benz and BMW, we have cases where these companies directly compete against each other. They have similar technologies, they have similar strategies, they have similar value propositions, they have similar final prices, and the most interesting thing is that they target directly at the same consumer. So in this particular case, we are talking about a strategic group. So why do we need to understand the strategic groups? The very important thing that we get when we conduct this strategic group mapping is that we can really have a better analysis of the industry, a better understanding of our rivals or competitors' position, and this way we can develop our strategies in a way that we can try to be a little bit more different than before, or we can understand much more whether changes in the environment or changes from any competitor, for instance launching a new product, are more direct or less direct challenges against our company. So when we understand an industry and we say that we have one group of factors that are very important, as in the 5 forces framework, rivalry, which is in the middle. This way we can understand more in depth rivals and their competitive position. As we said before, when we are talking about a strategic group, we have firms or companies that have comparable product line breadth. I mean, they have similar products. As you can see, Mercedes-Benz or BMW, they compete for all different segments. 1 series, 2 series, 3 series. They have basically the same products. In the case of BMW is 1, 2 or 3 series. In Mercedes-Benz is A, B, C series. So we are talking about the same thing. Similar products, they have more or less, and they compete on the same range of price and quality. They have similar distribution channels. They have the same attributes to appeal these buyers, these consumers. For instance, in both cases, they emphasize safety, high-tech, comfort, luxury. So they have exactly the same attributes to try to attract the same customers. They use different technological approaches. I mean, they have the same technologies, and they have more or less coverage of the same geographic areas. So these all are necessary variables that qualify for a competitor being considered a direct competitor and being within our own strategic group. Now, how can we construct a strategic group map? Obviously, we have to take all different competitive companies that we have in the industry, but the ones that have the same variables or the same similar competitive characteristics that are exactly these ones. So the companies that have similar products, similar prices, similar technologies, similar attributes, and so on, would be those that will be considered part of our strategic group. So the step one is that we identify all these attributes, all these characteristics. Then we can start to apply this process of grouping by selecting 2 variables, and we can start to add more variables to try to see whether the company really is in our group. So we can say that the company has similar technologies. Okay, so this can be BMW and Toyota. Both have combustion engines, electric vehicles, and hybrid vehicles. The companies have the same market coverage. Yes, both operate in Germany. But the third variable, when we talk about the attributes, this is going to be different, because BMW is appealing more luxury or high status or premium products that Toyota doesn't do. In this case, Toyota would not be part of the BMW strategic group, but Lexus, which is part of the Toyota family, will be. So in this strategic group by Mercedes-Benz, we will dismiss Toyota, but we will add, for instance, Lexus. Then we have to assign all the companies that have similar strategy in the strategic group. Despite having said before that the companies that are in the same strategic group, they have all these similar characteristics about product, technology, market coverage, and so on. One important one that really qualifies for a given company to be in the strategic group, as you can see here in step 3, is that they have similar strategies. When I say similar strategies, is that they have similar initiatives to respond to environmental changes, and therefore they can be considered part of the strategic group. So how can we interpret these strategic groups that have all these similar characteristics plus similar strategies? So the most interesting thing that we can get from this analysis is especially that we are identifying the companies that are really direct competitors. Therefore, when we monitor and watch the industry competitors, we need to have special attention and really benchmark those that are within the strategic group. Because those that are within the strategic group are going to be considered direct rivals, and those that are in other strategic groups are going to be less direct or less important rivals, despite having to really have a look at them and having to really monitor them, but in a less important way than the ones that are within our strategy group. Second is that we are also understanding the different positions that are covered in the market, and this way we can find better those empty spaces that no one is really competing on. So this way it can be a very interesting thing for companies to have really a better understanding of what competitive positions are less competitive than others. Having said that, what I mean is that when you analyze the strategic groups in the map, you can see positions that have much more competitors and positions that have less competitors. This is very important when we are using the strategic group analysis, that we understand the competition, not rather focusing on the entire industry at large, okay, in this particular case, automotive industry, because as you can see, not all of them compete against each other, okay? So we can be more selective, focusing on understanding who competitors really are. In this way, we can better perform our environment analysis. When I say that, I particularly mean that when you are analyzing the environment using the pestle, in the competitive position, you have a better idea about competition, about who the competitors really are. Or for instance, in the 5 forces framework, you can see in the central force, rivalry, the intensity of rivalry in this particular position, how important are those companies that are direct rivals or others that are less rival. Also, when we are applying the SWOT analysis, in the external side, opportunities and threats, we can also understand much better competition and whether this competition can be really a threat or not. The same way we can analyze the strategic spaces that can constitute an opportunity in the sense that they are less attractive or they have less competitors. So we can see those groups that have less competition and for this reason can be more attractive for our repositioning in that particular part of the industry that can be more profitable. And also understanding a concept which is used very intensively in strategic analysis, which is that of mobility barriers. What are mobility barriers? The mobility barriers are those barriers, obstacles, that prevent changing from one group to another group. So for instance, if we go to the first example, you can see that why Ford or General Motors or Toyota cannot be in the Porsche and Ferrari strategic group. Why they cannot move to that particular strategic group? Because there are barriers to entry, obstacles to entry in that particular Porsche and Ferrari strategic group. What are those barriers? First of all, one single barrier would be brand recognition, premium, high social status, high quality. Ford doesn't have enough brand recognition to be in this particular position. Another one can be technology. Ford doesn't have the high-performing technology that Ferrari has, understanding that Ferrari competes on Formula One. So these constitute barriers of entry that prevent companies from one strategic group to move into another strategic group. The same way we can say that Porsche and Ferrari cannot move to this Hyundai or Suzuki strategic group because this will be really a way to dismiss their brand and really destroy its own competitive advantage about high-end luxury premium brands. Having said that, the important thing is that we understand the idea of mobility barriers as those barriers that prevent moving one competitor to another one. If we are talking about the grocery industry, one of the core mobility barriers, for instance, in Amazon, is that Amazon doesn't have physical stores. This is a very important barrier that prevents Amazon from moving to the mainstream groceries that are urban, that have stores. So that will be an example of mobility barrier. Depending on the industry, we have one type of mobility barriers or different types of mobility barriers. Now, the same exercise that we have done trying to map the industry and trying to understand much better competitors, understanding whether competitors are or not direct competitors, whether competitors have or not similar strategies, we can do exactly the same with the market. Industry on one side is connected to strategic groups. The market, the consumers, are connected to what we call segments. A segment, it's a group of consumers that have similar needs or similar attributes. And as you can see, most of the cases, segments are directly connected to strategic groups. So imagine that we have the strategic group in the automotive industry, and we have that of Ferrari or Porsche. For Ferrari or Porsche, we have a specific segment, which is a group of consumers with similar needs, that they don't really pay attention to the price. They only value whether the product, in this particular case the automobile, is high-end, it's luxury, is premium, has the best technology, the best power horse, and things like that. And this group of consumers in the segment A that go directly to the strategic group A, for instance, Porsche and Ferrari, totally differ from the segment that is the segment D or E or F, which is a group of consumers that the most important thing that they value is the price of the product. They are very price sensitive. They don't care about technology. They want something really low cost, and they will be more connected to the strategic group of, for instance, Suzuki automobiles. So one way to understand the market, it's not understanding just the market in general, but understanding market segments by which we are going to get exactly a similar map as that we have seen in strategic groups. We are going to have similar variables, but of course focus on consumers, focus on final clients, which are going to be different from those that we use for strategic groups. But the idea is the same. The company is in a strategic group, and that strategic group is mainly aimed at one specific or different segments. So for instance, Mercedes-Benz and BMW are going to cover one segment that probably will be also covered by Lexus. But Mercedes-Benz or BMW probably will not enter in the segment that is covered by Hyundai or, for instance, by Kia, because it's a low-end segment, more price sensitive, less technology intensive, and so on. So we can get exactly the same map in strategic groups, companies, and market segments. The typical variables that are used for segmenting are those that are like demographics, that talk about the age, sex, race, income, ethnicity, social status, things like that in consumers, okay? For instance, they also have other variables that are more behavioristic, the specific situation of purchase the product or the using the product. In this case, we have, for instance, if consumers are or not loyal to the brand, the purpose to use the product. Are you consuming the product for professional reasons, or are you consuming the product for leisure time? Are you intensively using the product because you're a professional, or you use the product occasionally, or you are using the product for becoming a beginner in this particular product, or you are an expert? We also can have other different variables like quality, or like, for instance, psychographic variables that are telling us psychological things for consuming the product. Are you consuming the product because your lifestyle is really outdoor, it's really environmentally sustainable perspective? So using these variables for consumers, we can get the same type of segment mapping where we are understanding much better and classifying much better consumers. One important concept that we need to understand when we are analyzing the environment, and this is beyond industries and markets, this is beyond the strategic groups and segmentation, the both sides of understanding how we can really understand better competitors, strategic groups in the industry, or how can we understand much better the customers, the segments that we are targeting at, is the idea, but of course related, is the idea of critical success factors. Critical success factors, or CSF, are those factors or criteria that are necessary just to be in the game. When I say just to be in the game, that means that are totally necessary for companies that want to compete, because they are really related to terms of cost or others beyond the cost. I don't agree that it's only cost, okay? It can be cost, can be technology, can be many things, but are like critical factors that are necessary for a company to compete, and at the same time are exactly what consumers are looking for, what consumers really value. That means that these criteria or these factors or these elements are the ones that really provide significant value to consumers and significant advantage to companies. If a company doesn't meet the critical success factors that exist in that particular industry market combination, the company cannot be in the game. The company cannot compete. So for instance, let's talk about groceries. If we talk about groceries, about the supermarket industry, we need to consider for the critical success factors a double-way approach by which we are considering on one side the industry, the competitors, the companies, and on the other side we are considering the segments, the customers. So one critical success factor for supermarkets is size. Why size? Size means how large, how big these companies are, because if you are not really large enough in the grocery industry, you cannot purchase in bulk, you cannot purchase in high volumes, and you cannot get discounts in the price. You cannot get the best cost for purchasing your products. Why is that? Because of course it's not the same when Walmart purchases any product and they pay only 100 because they purchase thousands and thousands or even millions of this product, or compared to a small supermarket that does not purchase thousands, purchase only hundreds, and they get a higher price than the lower price got by Walmart. So if you don't have size, if you are not large enough, you cannot be competitive in the grocery industry because you cannot meet a critical success factor just to be in game in the industry, which is having enough volume to get lower prices. This would be from the strategic group, from the industry perspective. Why is from the strategic group? Because if you are in a boutique for a delicatessen for groceries, size is not necessary because you do not compete on price, you compete on quality. But if you are in the basic staples, groceries, like Walmart or others, size is necessary because it's the only way to get a very low price. And why do we want to get a low price? Because we go to the other side, which is the market, the segment, and the segment that it's covered by these supermarkets, the customers that go to Walmart, for instance, they get critical success factors, price. If you are not large enough, if you don't get a high volume, you don't get a low cost, and if you don't get a low cost, you don't meet the critical success factor on the supply side, on the strategic group side. So then you cannot meet the other factor, which is based on the consumers. In the consumers, the critical success factor to be in the grocery industry is price. If you don't get good prices, you are out of the market. I am not saying that cost, because of volume, because being large companies, size, or price are the only ones. Of course, if you are in a supermarket in the grocery industry, you need also to give service. You need to have very good operations. You need to have perfect logistics. You need to have good marketing, good commercials, many things like that. But size is necessary, is critical for trying to really get low prices. And of course, consumers are not only seeking price, they also want to have closer to their homes supermarkets, they want service, they want different things, but price is one of them. So in this particular example, please understand size for a lower cost and price from the customer's perspective as examples of what critical success factors are. Another example is, for instance, the brand. If you want to be in the high-end luxury automotive industry, in particular in the Mercedes-Benz, BMW or Lexus strategic group, you need to have a very, very good brand recognition. You need to be considered a premium brand. If you don't have that brand, you cannot meet the critical success factors in that particular strategic group. So again, it's not only necessary the brand to be in this strategic group, of course. Then you need to have good technology, good customer service, many different things. But brand, it's like a threshold. It's necessary but not sufficient. It's a critical success factor to be in the segment. So for consumers and for a strategic group, for both sides, strategic group and segments, for companies and final consumers, a critical success factor to understand this particular position would be the brand. This is a critical success factor. So it's very important that companies, when they are analyzing customers, segmenting, or the environment, the industry, understanding strategic groups, they need to really understand the critical success factors. Those criteria that need to be met to be competitive in the industry. Finally, I want to give you some concepts about understanding these things, which is the idea of red oceans and blue oceans. A red oceans is those positions in the market where there is a lot of competition. Those strategic groups that are populated by a lot of companies that are trying to share the same segment, the same group of consumers. You can improve your position, you can launch a new strategy, lowering your cost or launching new products, but you are like trapped in a competitive position when there is a lot of pressure, a lot of competition. Think about, for instance, Ford or General Motors, which are very simple examples in the automotive industry in the United States, that they are low-cost base spots. They cover low-cost, low-end positions in the market space, in the industry space, and they are going to suffer a very intense competition from the Chinese manufacturers. For instance, BYD company. But these Chinese manufacturers, probably they cannot get into the Mercedes-Benz or BMW strategic group. First of all, because we have the mobility barriers, brand recognition, reputation, or technology that the Chinese cannot meet to be in that particular group. But the most important thing for these concepts is understanding the idea of blue ocean. Blue ocean is a new market space where competition is minimized or is non-existent. So when companies or startups or entrepreneurs talk about blue oceans, they refer to make innovations that turn the company in a position where there is no competition. So for instance, think about Airbnb or Uber. When they develop this new product, this new value proposition, this new business model, they automatically were positioned in a way without competition and with a very open and big market only for them. This is the idea of blue ocean. Tesla, when Tesla disrupted with the electric vehicles, they were automatically in a position, electric vehicles, that no one was covering, or competition was very minimal. At that time, they were in a blue ocean. Blue ocean, we call this blue ocean to refer to competitive positions that require innovation, but they are going to reposition the company, changing the position of the company in a space competitive and according to the market where there is no competition. Finally, I want you to understand the idea that any industry like automotive, they have a life cycle. That means that we have development, growth, shakeout, maturity, and decline. That means that we need to understand exactly which is the particular stage at which we are positioned in the industry life cycle. So for instance, if we are talking about electric vehicles, we are probably in the growth stage. But if we are talking about fuel cell, hydrogen-powered vehicles, we are in the development, at the beginning of the industry. And if we are talking about combustion engines, the traditional cars, we are between maturity and a little bit of even decline. Okay? So depending on the stage at which we are competing on the industry, we will need to have one strategies or others. We will talk later about this in another video. Thank you so much.